As the NFL season winds down, Jeff Bell and I are turning the page to rookie content. And today we've got a handful of rookies we expect to declare for the 2026 draft that you should be paying attention to. Jeff, you and I were talking pre-show a little bit, and we don't want to pretend to be something we're not. We are believers in showing our work, and we are prepping for the rookie guide that we do every single year that comes out mid to end of January, version 1 of that. And part of this is going through all of these rookies, compiling scouting reports, learning about them all, and we are in the early stages of doing that now. Fun stuff, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It is turning the page. It's really interesting to get into it. And both of us are very, very busy during the season. We have deliverables that we're driving towards every single day of every single week. We're focused on rankings. We're focused on player news. We're focused on the articles and the content that we deliver. And so, it usually is this is the first beginning stages of looking at next year's rookie class. I'm a little bit more conservative probably than many when it comes to the rookie space. I wrote about the big board this past year, picked that up and kind of looked forward to some players, but really I look at college football as I enjoy watching college football. And then I kind of turn my mind off and then I do prospecting. It's completely different than just enjoying a Saturday afternoon of being a Buckeyes fan or watching the other great teams. And so I think it's when we get to this point of the year, we can set aside the NFL a little bit and we get excited to look what is next year going to look like.
So let's talk about and one other thing I want to say is there's some big names that we might not be talking about today, but Jeff, we were careful to talk about guys that we are fairly confident are going to be in the 2026 draft. So like Fernando Mendoza might be, but we don't know. Like he has talked about potentially returning back to school. That's not a guy we're going to talk about today. Jeremiah Love is another guy who has talked about potentially returning to school. We want to talk about the guys who have already declared for either the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl, guys that we fully expect to enter the 2026 draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So peek behind the curtain, but we have done the Football Guys Rookie Guide now for a number of years and take primary responsibility in building out the player pool. And I think that something that people might not understand when it comes to building out the player pool is there's no real clean place to go and just get the list from. It's not like so simple as like when you're looking at the NFL, you can just break down a team's depth chart and you can see who's on the active roster. And it's pretty straightforward at who the players are going to be. When we're building the player pool for the rookie guide, you're really combing through the news and waiting to see that players are in the draft. And so players that you mentioned with Fernando Mendoza and then Jeremiah Love, they've not declared as of this recording yet. So the way that I build the player pool is until a player declares, until I know that they are going to be in the draft, they are not in the draft. And so, yes, Jeremiah Love, he's very likely probably going to be in the draft. I mean,
right. But
Brinks truck could back up in Notre Dame and keep him there. It's the world that we live in now.
And the reason we do this, we just don't want to do extra work. We don't have to, like spending the time to compile all the information for a guy like Fernando Mendoza, just for him to go back to school. That happened last year. I'm trying to think who it was. Was it Oscar Delp? Was that the kid from?
Very high profile. TreVeyon Henderson was a player that was
right.
Everybody assumed was going to be in 2 classes ago, and he came back to Ohio State. Ohio State had multiple players that they came back, unfinished business, went out, won the national championship, but TreVeyon Henderson was in everybody's ranks 2 years ago, and with the expectation that he would be in that draft, and it was a shocking announcement that he went back to school.
Yeah, and I remember the one that sticks out to me like a sore thumb is Oscar Delp, because I remember like setting my rankings in and I did a whole scouting report on everything on Oscar Delp, and you were like, Dave, I'm pretty sure this kid's going back to Georgia. And I was like, no, like he's going to the NFL. He's NFL ready, and he went back to Georgia. So lesson learned, we're only talking about players that we are absolutely certain are entering the class, the draft this year.
And we love Sleeper. Sleeper does a great job. And we love that we can do rookie mock drafts on Sleeper. But the reality of it is some players slip through and some players are in the pool of the early rookie mock drafts that don't end up being in the draft. And some of those guys keep getting drafted the entirety of the mock draft season, even though they are not actually going to be in the draft. But again, we do love Sleeper and they do a very good job. We're thankful that we can utilize them for rookie mock drafts. We always do that. We've done that the last couple of years for the part of the rookie guide, and Joey Wright did that last year of heading that up and having those drafts. And so if you're interested in checking those out, for sure, make sure to connect with Joey. And I'm sure I think we have nominated Joey to handle it again, because Joey did just a fantastic job of that last year. But if that is something that interests you, and it's a valuable part of what we do here at Football Guys, wisdom of the crowd. We had a call yesterday talking about how
Mhm.
much we value wisdom of the crowd at Football Guys and how much value that does hold. And so actively, we want to hear your opinions and have you participate in those things as well.
The Joey Wright on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it, just shoot him a DM and say, "Hey, I want to be a part of the Football Guys rookie mock drafts," and he will get you in on that. You'll get to draft with Jeff and I and some other Football Guys staffers, as well as some friends of the show. So just a fun way to help give back a little bit to what we're doing here and be a part of the rookie guide that we put our blood, sweat, and tears into. But Jeff, disclaimers out of the way. We've talked about it. This is the first rookie show that we have done for the 2026 class. And let's start off talking about Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State. I watched this guy today, and I've seen highlights, of course, coming across social media. This guy has been a buzzy name this entire year, but just such a good athlete, a sharp route runner. I don't want to make like the high end comp, but when I'm watching him in college, I see a little bit of CeeDee Lamb, a little bit of Jackson Smith-Njigba, one of these guys who is just sudden and explosive with his movements, a crisp route runner, good hands. I mean, to me, what I try to do so often when I see these guys that are atop the list of prospects is try to find where they could fail. And maybe you can shine a light on something that I didn't see, but I did not see a weakness in this game. Like he's got the size, the speed, the athleticism, the explosiveness, the hands, everything you want to see from a prospect. When I watch this guy, to me, he looks like a guy who should be going top 15, top 20 in the draft.
Yeah, he's going to be a first round pick. It would be surprising if he's a first round pick. And players like that, you talk about where they could fail. It often ends up being between the ears is where they could fail. Players like that, you can see all the things that all the physical tools are there. It's that you even NFL scouts and NFL general managers
Mhm.
and that are sitting these guys down to interview, you don't really know what you've got until you've got a guy there. And I'm a big same school comp person.
Mhm.
And I that's kind of one of the, like, people don't like to do that. People don't like to do same school comps, and which to me is lunacy, because the same school comp, you and it's a little bit different here where I'm going to go with this, but it a little reminds me of Brandon Ayuk at Arizona State,
All
where
right.
kind of very twitched up athlete, very polished when it comes to being able to run all the routes. But the reason why I like same school comps is because you are looking for players that fit your scheme. You have your recruiting team out there looking for players that can do these things that fit your offense, and then those players come to your school because and you develop them. And so to me, it's very
Developed by the
natural,
same coaches.
developed by the same coaches, playing in the same system. And I think that pretty certain there's been a coach change since Brandon Ayuk was there, and Arizona State fans can, but I don't think Dillingham was there when Ayuk was there. He's been in the league long enough, but Dillingham's done a fantastic job at Arizona State. But when fundamentally you're looking for similar type players, because that's a lot easier when you're the coach that you've got a system and you can look for all the recruits across the country and find these players that fit the profiles of what you're looking for. But to me, it's definitely, he's a first round pick. He's got a great chance to be the number one wide receiver in the class. He itches all those boxes that you're looking for when you're looking for a fantasy wide receiver, because his game is really built to handle volume at the NFL level. He's able to impact the game at all three levels. He's able to create after the catch. He can in the short to intermediate areas, and that's where we see so many targets are generated in that area of the field. He excels in that area, and he can also win downfield. And so when you're looking for a wide receiver, you're looking for, I talk all the time about all three levels, and that's the short game, the intermediate game, and the deep game. And if he can make an impact in all those levels, and really for a wide receiver, the most well-rounded player that you can be, you feel the best about them when you're looking at projecting where they could end up in the highest ceiling that they could possess.
So I think the interesting thing here, Jeff, I'm looking at Tankathon right now, the projected draft order for 2026, and there's this really weird cluster where you typically see a lot of these first round wide receivers go. And of course, you've got your Jamar Chases and your Drake Londons that are going to go inside the top 10. But typically, we see a guy like Jordan Addison. I'd expect him to fall in like the 15-20 range. And when you look at the teams that are drafting in that range, it's kind of weird, from 9 Forward, you've got the Bengals, who have two very good wide receivers. You've got the Rams, who have two very good wide receivers. You've got the Dolphins, who have Jalen Waddle, and hoping Tyreek Hill can come back from that injury. They might be in play for this year. The Kansas City Chiefs, they've never really been a team that invests heavily in wide receivers in the draft. The Vikings have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. The Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. The Ravens kind of jump out to me as a team that might be interested here. Carolina, I don't think they're going to do it. Detroit, they're pretty set at wide receiver. The Jets, they might be looking for somebody to complement Garrett Wilson, but there are a lot of teams picking in the middle of round one this year that already have a pretty good 1-2 punch. Do you think a team that has like two good wide receivers would be interested in spending a first round pick on a player like Jordan Tyson?
I think the Rams are very much in play for a wide receiver. There was talk last year, and maybe it was for Tyler Warren, maybe it was for Colson Loveland. I mean, there's been talk the last couple of years that the Rams have been trying to aggressively move up the board. There was a lot of talk last year that the Rams wanted to go up to get Tedero McMillan. I think the Rams right now sitting in with Atlanta's pick at number 10, very much in play. I mean, you talk about the Jets, Cleveland at 4 or 5. Those teams are very much in play. Tennessee at 3, right, very much in play. I mean, Tennessee, the Giants, if they end up with the top pick, they could be shopping that around to do what your Chicago Bears did and move back into the 9 or 10 pick and have somebody come up to go get their quarterback. So that is where, I mean, you can talk about that 10 to 18 range, and I hear you, but at the same time,
we don't even know because
he's probably going to be off the board by then, or because we know. And that is the other part of it too. If you're just getting into the rookie stuff, if you're relatively new to the draft, really, when you're talking the top half of the first round, but really just the first half in general, you have to look for players that impact the passing game. And it has to be really a quarterback, a wide receiver, sometimes a tight end, sometimes a running back if it's very correct in what they can do, but quarterback, wide receiver,
or an edge rusher, impacting the rushing game in a different way.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of these guys in the middle of the field where, interior offensive linemen, off-ball linebackers, they have to be the right type of a defensive tackle, or safeties are just going to be devalued. And we're going to see that in the draft. Like Caleb Downs from Ohio State. He's Josh Downs' younger brother. He is a phenomenal safety and smart, heady football player, good athlete, and he's probably not going to get drafted in terms of where his impact on the field actually dictates he should, because NFL GMs, especially in the top half of the draft, devalue certain positions relative to other positions.
And the other thing is, like, we talk about where we expect players to go. That is such an imperfect science. Going into last year, I forget exactly where it settled in, but I remember like everybody was taking the under on Tedero McMillan. And I want to say he was at like 17 and a half, pick 17 and a half or something like that. Like people were expecting him to fall, into the back half of round 2. He didn't make it out of the top 10. Then you flash back 2 years ago. I remember Jackson Smith-Njigba. You and I thought this guy was like a locked in top 5, top 6, maybe top 7 pick. He falls all the way to 20 in the draft. So we talk so much about like where we expect these players to go. And even Vegas, who has the smartest minds in the world trying to calculate these odds, typically ends up being pretty far off on a lot of these players. So we can speculate all we want, but we are still working with, just a few pieces to a much larger puzzle. Let's go ahead and talk about the next guy I want to mention here, Jeff. Jacoby Lane. And first of all, I'm saying that I want to mention. No, you get the credit for this. I reached out to you and I said, Jeff, give me a list of rookies that you want to talk about in today's show. So the guy you want to talk about next, Jacoby Lane, wide receiver out of USC. Now, this is an interesting player because I don't know how I expect this skill set to translate to the NFL. He's fast, elite body control. He's good at high pointing the ball, but he is one of those just rail thin guys. He is so skinny. And I know this was the talking point years ago when Devonta Smith was coming into the league. The difference here, of course, is that Jacoby Lane is much taller, listed at 6'4", but that tall, thin frame, you see him get jammed up at the line of scrimmage. You see him get knocked off at his routes. Like I said, a lot of times what I'm trying to do is pick holes in these profiles to see where things could go wrong. And where I couldn't find much with Jordan Tyson, I do have some of those concerns about Jacoby Lane. Now, of course, he can bulk up, he can develop. We see players go that route a lot of big plays as well. And I think like, I don't want to make a comp here because, we don't know the high end and low end range of outcomes. But for me, I see some Jalen Coker in his game, like a guy who made a lot of big plays in college. And we've seen Coker through his first couple of years in the league has bulked up significantly. And now he can play in the middle of the field and he can play out of the slot and he can do those things. But right now, I don't see Jacoby Lane as a player who has that sort of on-field strength yet. Jeff, what are some of the things that you're seeing when you look at a player like Jacoby Lane?
Uh, Downfield ability. He's an outside receiver. He is strictly an outside receiver. Mekhi Lemon, his teammate, is excellent, and Mekhi Lemon is going to be drafted way before Jacoby Lane is going to be drafted. Jacoby Lane, I added to the list. He was an early declare. He declared yesterday, so pick that news up, and I think he's worth talking about. I do expect him to be probably late into the first round, maybe more probably a second to into the third round type of a player. But I think for
And
him,
I just
just
want to check
outside,
Mackay Lemon has not declared yet, right?
not declared yet, not declared
We
yet.
expect
So
him to, the Bolitnikoff winner. We expect him to hit the draft, but he might go back to school, which is why we aren't talking about him today.
and I mean that's another thing to talk about too. But I do think that part of it, some of the guys like him, they wait to declare to kind of build the buzz a little bit. And I know that
Yeah.
that is something that Ohio State has really done with for their athletes is they really wait until the last minute to build the buzz. I remember CJ Stroud. There was like absolutely no way CJ Stroud was going to go back to college, but at the same time they waited until the very last day to announce it, and it just created something where there was 4 or 5 days of speculation of, is he going to go out? Is he? And I think that teams, college teams are very, very smart in how they are building the profiles for their guys. And
Mhm.
Lemon is a high enough profile player that USC can kind of sit on that a little bit and wait, and then allow the news cycle. We know how the news cycle works, and the goldfish brain, and gonna be whatever we can talk about. And so waiting into the closer to the process, and like Jeremiah Love's a player that we've talked about. Fernando Mendoza is another player like that. I mean, Fernando Mendoza has a championship to try to go win, but Jeremiah Love doesn't have to play any more football. But at the same time, it wouldn't be surprising to see them wait just a little bit later into the process to see the build the a little bit. Is he going to or is he not? And then also the reality of it is with the way that college football is structured too. I mean, there's always the chance that somebody walks in with a $10 million check to have Jeremiah Love stay at Notre Dame, and Jeremiah Love says, "I would make that would take me 4 years to make that much money, so I'll just make that
And,
right now."
and don't hear what we're not saying. We're not saying we
Yeah,
expect these players to go back to school. We're just saying that we don't want to do the work on players that we don't know yet. So yeah,
exactly.
like Lemon, Mendoza, Love, these guys all might declare, but January 15th is that deadline. So until then, there will be a lot of speculation, but we've got about a month until we find out who all is declaring for the draft and who isn't.
Yeah, and so let's go back to Jacoby Lane because that's what we
Yes.
were talking about here. And to me, it's kind of like a George Pickens. I think is a good kind of jumping off for him. Similar type of a player to early in Pickens' career, winning with verticality, the ability to make big plays downfield. I mean, Jacoby Lane has done a fantastic job of, especially around the red zone, but just playing the ball in the air. And you do like to see that he does bring that to bring the. I think that when I see Jacoby Lane, he's pretty young. He's a true junior, 21 years old. So I see a frame that can develop and put the weight on to become, and again, it's like Pickens, where Pickens was a younger player and he was very wiry when he first got into the league, dealt with some injuries at Georgia, and then has really built and developed himself into a player that can operate in more areas of the field. Jacoby Lane, to look at him, is more of a projection of a player that where can we get him to, and so there might be some limitations coming out, and I think that that's another thing that we've seen and about some of these bigger receivers tend to start a little bit slower in the NFL
Yep.
game. Some of these guys that are more contested catch guys because they're dealing with physicality that they've never experienced before. Like Rome Odunze is a guy that's struggling a little bit with that right now. Marvin Harrison Jr., another guy that Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to redefine the wide receiver position, and the reality of it is he is playing defensive backs at a lot stronger than what he was in the past, and so these
And
players,
let's not forget even Drake London didn't
yeah,
eclipse 1,000 yards for his first 2 years in the league. Like we talk about this all the time. Like this
yep,
is not these players when they're drafted at 21 years old. That's not who they're going to be for the rest of their life. Like some of these guys, like look at Darnell Washington, for instance. The guy's put on like 100 pounds since he's been in the league. Like we see these guys fill out, change how they play, and that's why you talk about this very often. We see these small, twitched up athletes can just come in and dominate from day one, and it takes these bigger guys time to adapt to that physicality and get up to NFL size.
exactly. And so I do expect him to be more of a project. And so that kind of pushes him out of the first round because first round, you really want something that's clean all around. But at the same time, the high end range is potentially there, and the desperation for wide receivers is very real. Wide receivers are, again, a blue chip position that everybody's looking for, and everybody can have more than one wide receiver. So it's anything is in play for wide receivers. He is the type of player that could get there. I'm not starting him there though, and so I'll kind of wait and see how the process goes.
Let's talk about another guy that I think is a bit of a project, wide receiver out of Tennessee, Chris Brazzell. Brazzell. I think
Brazzell.
that's how you say it. Chris Brazzell. Brazzell or Brazzell. It's one of those. Well, somebody let us know if you can give us the phonetic spelling in the comments. We would appreciate that. Some of these names are new to me, but this guy Jeff was just a pleasure to watch. You know, when I put on his film, I immediately was just like, this guy is fun. 6'5", incredibly shifty, just a graceful athlete at that. Whether it's running routes after the catch, tracking the ball downfield. I mean, he is just graceful for his size. You would not think that this guy is 6'5" if you didn't see him just towering over his defenders. But again, we talk about this. These guys take some time. He is another wiry guy, you know, just around 200 pounds at 6'5". He, when I look at him, I see the high end range of outcomes being a T. Higgins, Drake London type of dominant X receiver. But given his size right now, you know, how skinny he is, the lack of play strength, very similar to what we were just talking about, Jacoby Lane. I think it's a project. You know, it'll take him some time to get there. But then on the flip side, we just saw Tedero McMillan come into the league. You know, another guy that we thought would take some time to develop and just immediately take over. I don't think that Brazzell is quite at that level yet, but this is a guy who I think if things work out for him, he has a very, very high ceiling, just given that natural athleticism that I see when he's playing.
Yeah, and so he is a really kind of a 1-year wonder, but the reality of it is he was behind multiple receivers. We know Dante Thornton is in the NFL right now and playing in the NFL. Squirrel White was a player that had a lot of buzz, but he kind of so. Brew McCoy was another one that was a high-end recruit, and so he was very experienced. So the reason why Brazzell didn't do a ton last year was because he was playing behind more experienced players that are NFL-ish caliber athletes. We know Brew McCoy didn't quite make it out, but Dante Thornton definitely did. So then you got 1-year production for a 4-year college player, and so that's going to be a red flag for some people because of the just the experience level. Those types of things can, in certain processes, can throw off flags. His dad was an NFL wide receiver, not a super long career for Chris Brazzell Sr., Chris Brazzell the first. He played for the Jets a little bit, didn't make it in any games, played for the Cowboys for a couple of years after that. So there's some NFL legacy there.
7 years in the Canadian Football League.
Yes,
though.
he had
Found
a
nice,
long career in
career
Canada. So
yep.
So
Sorry, I
legacy.
just wanted to add to that.
No, you're good. No, that's a good callback because yes, that is a good callback. He did have a long career in Canada, but a legacy player that he's familiar with the game, that he has grown and developed. Tennessee wide receivers are a little bit iffy when it comes to the NFL draft. Tennessee, their offensive scheme tends to be taken with a massive grain of salt at the NFL level because of just some things that this Josh Heupel scheme does to make life a little bit easier for receivers. So the way that they line up and some of the splits doesn't necessarily translate all the best. Jalen Hyatt is a player a couple of years ago. We saw him win the Blitnikoff Award and carry some level of hype in the NFL. He's not really seen it put together. We really haven't seen too many Tennessee wide receivers put it together at the NFL level. So that's the caveat probably on Brazzell at this point. But again, I think that he's a player that on that bubble to be a first round pick, second round pick type of a player, great ceiling, great, all the things that you mentioned. We've seen him be an excellent athlete, win downfield, win with the verticality. I think you're right on it too. There's these bigger receivers. It's rare, like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State is like an absolute freak of freaks. Like it's just not, you don't see the 6'4" wide receivers in college that are regularly twitched up 225, 230, like the way that they will become by the time they get to their third and fourth years in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about that Tennessee system a little bit. I'm racking my brain. Like Cordell Patterson is the only one I can really think of in recent history.
That was like 15 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. And it took him until like year 9 to break out in the NFL in like unforeseen circumstances, playing with Arthur Smith in this like weird kind of new age offense. So that's kind of the best case scenario there. And we always have to kind of put, we do the same thing with a lot of players out of Ole Miss, in that Lane Kiffin offense. You just kind of have to put like an asterisk next to their name, just saying like, this is kind of what this system does in college. And that's what we've seen from Tennessee. I mean, Jalen Wright, we've seen he hasn't really found his footing in the NFL. Dylan Sampson, has looked okay, but like these guys are so much more productive in college than they typically end up being once they hit the pros.
Juwan Jennings was a Tennessee wide receiver. But,
there you go.
All
right, there you go.
He did a fair amount of development at the NFL level. So,
right.
But I do think strength is going to be key for Brazzell to grow and develop there. He could be a player that could start slow, that if he has to deal with some physicality.
So let's talk about some of the running backs here, Jeff. And again, like we're early in the process, but we're coming off of a very good 2025 running back class, and I don't think that the 2026 class is going to quite be there. But maybe you can check me here. To me, like looking at some of the different positions, it seems like this is another class where the strength is going to be in the running backs. Is that your read here as well, Jeff, or am I getting a little ahead of myself?
I don't know. So everybody is down on the 2026 class. I tend to believe that there's going to be, I tend to believe that people are going to have their rookie fever, like always. And some of that is context of, again, a guy mentioned Jeremiah Smith is like a generational wide receiver prospect in the true sense of the word, a word that gets thrown around way too much. So I think it's taking everything with a grain of salt there. I do think that I would say probably the strength is going to be around wide receiver. I think is where you'll see the most of the wide receivers be the first round of the rookie draft. Quarterback is not really good right now. And I think a lot of guys that could be in that quarterback class are going to decide to go back to school. We saw Arch Manning decide to go back to school, and that was kind of something that's been speculated for a long time, and they said even in the announcement that his intention was never to go into the draft, despite the speculation that was there in the offseason. So I think that what you are going to see is the wide receivers are going to be kind of the headliners in this rookie class. There's a couple tight ends. Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon everybody's going to be all over him. You're going to have a couple other guys kind of on the fringe there with tight ends. Jeremiah Love is going to be the headliner of headliners. He's probably going to be the 101 in most rookie drafts. And then you're going to have a handful of wide receivers behind him. Jordan Tyson is one of the guys that will be there that we've already mentioned. But I think the running backs, nothing really compares to what we had last year. I mean, last year was one of those, like, you have to go back to like the Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott Derrick Henry class to really feel like where you're landing with last year's running backs. But I think that as running back as it always is, it's so landing spot dependent. And I mean, there are a bunch of guys that even the depth of last year's running back class, like a guy like RJ Harvey, very few were all over him at this point of the game with RJ Harvey. So there are going to be rookies that end up there. They're going to be rookie running backs that have a ton of hype, and a lot of it's going to depend on landing spot.
So we talked about this last year around this time where people were like already starting to kind of just put a nail in the coffin of these 2026 draftees. And I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut right now, Jeff. 2026 first round picks are still trending down. 2027 picks are still trending up. So we're still at the point where the consensus is valuing 2027 picks ahead of 2026 picks. My guess is that we see that flip sometime like late January, early February when people start plugging in.
It's not
really
going to
flip.
Think so. No. And you go back a couple years ago, the Bijan Robinson class, it never flipped for that class. Yeah. The 27 class has way too much hype for it to flip. And what you're going to see is some of these, like Lenora Sellers is another one that went back to school. Some of the quarterbacks, the lack of quarterbacks in the 26 class is going to hold back the 26 class relative to 27. It's really going to be about the Jeremiah Smith, though, at the very top, and having lottery tickets for Jeremiah Smith. Ryan Williams from Alabama is a player that fell off a little bit this year. Cam Coleman from Auburn, a lot of hype around him. It's going to end up being, it's never going to flip. The Bijan class, it never flipped. But that being said, the picks to be able to acquire those rookie picks did get a little bit cheaper in the Bijan class, but it was still kind of one of those things of it never made the full turn. The fever for Bijan Robinson himself was more than enough. And I think Jeremiah Smith will more than be enough that it's not going to flip.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, I trust you more than I trust myself in these sorts of discussions. But
I think you're right on the right sense there that the 26 picks are going to become more valuable. and it's going
Right.
to become easier to turn a 26 pick into a 27 pick than it is right now. So
Especially now in the playoffs when like people are pushing, like trying to get those championships. This is when you go out, and if you're out of it, you go and buy those 2026 picks where you can.
exactly. And you're exactly right there. And so trying to buy the picks now is the time when you can buy them. Now when people know that they are trading away the 111, 112 and there's a chance for that title there, they're going to be a lot more willing to make that move here in the next 2 weeks. If you're in a league that still allows trading, they'll be a lot more willing to make that move, to move that 112 right now, because flags fly forever. Whereas when you get into the rookie draft, and everybody's tiered it out and they say, well, no, this is going to be this player, then
Mhm.
it can become very, very, when there's no points to be scored, it can be very hard to grab a first round rookie pick.
Let's talk about some of the running backs here, Jeff. Emmitt Johnson is the first one we're going to talk about. And this guy has garnered a ton of buzz. I've been seeing his name popping up all season. And digging into it a little bit today, I was kind of surprised. He had a very slow start to his career, developed into a very good running back this year. But I get a little bit concerned when I see those late breakouts and early career struggles. So maybe you can help me contextualize that a little bit. But this was a running back wide receiver hybrid in high school that is very much so on display when he is running routes and catching the ball. He's got really good hands out of the backfield. This is one I wanted to come away a little bit more impressed than I was, and I still have a lot more to watch. I just watched one game on him, but just the size and the speed isn't really there for me. He's a little bit undersized. I don't know if he has that home run speed that's going to translate to the NFL. So a lot of breakaway runs in college, and that's great. But I didn't see the speed that's going to beat NFL angles. To me, I see like a Caleb Johnson, a little bit smaller, slightly better hands. I don't know what your takeaway is on Emmitt Johnson. I want to watch more of this guy because I want to come away more impressed because of all of the buzz that I've been hearing about from people that I really respect. But I just didn't see anything watching him today that got me especially excited.
Yeah, I don't think you're there on Caleb Johnson was more invited contact a little bit too much. I think inviting contact a little bit too much at the NFL level ends up being guys that just get
So
tackled. But
here's what the Caleb Johnson. I remember last year we were talking about like Caleb Johnson, this like breakaway speed that you see at Iowa was really him just running through wide open holes and then beating out college players. But those 60-yard touchdowns that we saw end up being 12, 15-yard gains in the NFL. And I think that's more what I'm saying with Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson was bigger, heavier, more violent, didn't catch the ball, but just kind of the breakaway runs in college that I fear won't translate to the NFL. That's where I was getting at with the Caleb Johnson comp.
yeah, so I think that I mean, yeah, Caleb Johnson was like all the players would kind of stack on top of him basically, and he'd shoot out the other side, and then like that
Right.
was explosion. Yeah, so I do Emmitt Johnson, I do see some explosion there. He's a very good athlete, and
Mhm.
so he's reported that he's hit 22.4 miles per hour on speed. Reported a 39-inch vertical, so he should test reasonably well. But I think that you talked about it there. He's converted wide receiver hybrid type player, so really kind of developing into his own. When you see him, it's a lot like not really kind of like the stiff arm, like pop off of guys a little bit more, as
Right.
opposed to put my shoulder down and deliver contact into you. And so that I think is a little bit of a concern when you're looking profiling to a running back at the NFL level. That being said, NFL level, you kind of it's like goes too far the other way. Where if you're like a tank, sure it works for Cam Scatterbo, but a lot of other guys just get tackled. I think for Emmitt Johnson, it's more the top end potentially is there. I don't know the breakaway speed. I think you're in the right place there on the breakaway speed, but it's a little bit more twitchy probably
Mm.
for Emmitt Johnson. And again, it's a player that he is able to shed contact, but not in the way that like through violence, more or less, kind of like wiggles out of it almost is kind of what you're seeing with him.
Which you see from a lot of like smaller guys, but he's not a smaller guy. Like I think he's probably going to measure in, my guess would be like around 210. Like, he doesn't have that 220 plus size, but he's also not like a sub 200 guy that wants to wiggle away from. He's kind of that like betweener. Like he's too big to be a scat back, but a little bit too small to be a big bruising back. And those guys, we do see them find their footing in the NFL every now and then. But I think typically you need to be like a supreme athlete to be able to do that. And I do see some good athleticism and explosive here. But like I said, the long speed concerns me a little bit. I'm not trying to say that Emmitt Johnson's going to be terrible. This is still very early in the process. I'm going to watch much more of him, but like I said, when I did watch him today, I just came away a little bit less impressed than I wanted to be.
He reminds me of RJ Harvey, is the player that he reminds me of out of last year's class. I think that RJ Harvey's probably a little bit faster on the top end, but that's who he reminded me of watching him in my first initial impression. But again, we're early in the process and we're going to be digging in and have more refined scouting reports by the time we get to the rookie guide. We're just trying to do an introduction right now.
Let's talk about these Penn State running backs, because these were two guys that I did come away very impressed with. And this is tough sometimes, Jeff. And we're both doing this whole scouting thing, and it's tough sometimes when you want to say that a player is really good, but they were also part of a good environment. And this, like when I'm watching both of these players, I saw things that I liked from both of them, but at the same time, I feel like almost any running back would have been able to find some sort of production behind this offensive line. Like there were so many times that these guys were just getting into the second level completely untouched at Penn State. But which one do you want to talk about first, Kaytron Allen or Nick Singleton? Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Allen, because you're excited about Allen.
I am. Yeah. And you know me, like there's a couple of things that I really like in running backs. If you are thick, like just a stout frame, and you also have soft hands out of the backfield, that is just like my kryptonite. I get weak in the knees for guys who can do that. Like, flashing back to Leonard Fournette is the first guy that I ever saw like really able to do that at his size. And, that's one of the reasons that I like Taj Brooks so much last year. I see a lot of that with Kaytron Allen, where he is this big, thick guy, and you wouldn't expect him to just bounce out of the backfield and catch the ball with soft hands, but he does that regularly. And I don't think he's the best route runner, and I think that he's not the most creative in space, but he can catch the ball, and that's 90% of being a pass catcher at the next level. Also patience, that's a big thing that I like with running backs, and I see him, he is a patient runner. He played behind a good offensive line, and it's easy to be patient when you know that your holes are going to open up eventually. But just checked a lot of the boxes that I like to see. Big frame, patient, good pass catcher. Those are like the three most important things to me, and Kaytron Allen does all of those things.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I feel like it's hard to talk about one of these Penn State running backs without talking about both of these Penn State running backs.
Right.
And so for full conception here, full context, Singleton was the number one running back recruit in the nation when he was coming out, and Allen was lower. I'm trying to my 24/7 Sports is not letting me find the information that I want right now. Allen was always viewed as the second guy, and so Singleton was always so he was running back 15. So he's not like dramatically lower, but one was running back 1 and one was running back 15. So in the Devy landscape, Singleton's always kind of been like the next dude, and Allen was always kind of been the secondary guy. And so when you're looking at them, Singleton is the home run guy, whereas Allen has always just kind of been the steady guy, the guy that even from the beginning you watch them, and Allen strikes you as the guy that he just understands how to play running back a little bit better than Singleton probably understands how to play running back. And so I think that Taj Brooks is an apt comp, and so there was, when I put the name on here, I knew the little Taj Brooks of Dave's gonna love this dude. And so
and I did.
That was, yeah, and he's always kind of been just the good, solid guy, whereas Singleton has been the flashy guy. And then in this past year, when everything went wrong at Penn State, the good, solid guy prevailed. The good, solid guy became the lead guy, and he ended up as the school leader, career rushing yards. And the flashy guy, I told you before,
a good running back for Penn State too. This isn't some small JUCO that he's setting records at. This is an established good college with a long lineage of pro running backs.
I was going to say, I think Penn State might have at one point in time had the moniker of running back U. So I don't know if they probably still don't have that. I don't know where it would be.
I think they lost that when they lost Saquon.
Alabama might be, or Georgia might be running back U. I don't know right now, but yeah, Penn State's got a great history there. So I think that when you look at the two of them, of looking at Allen kind of profiling to be more that study guy, I would expect Allen to be kind of the guy that's a third round pick, fourth round pick type guy, maybe second round pick. He's not going to be a first round pick, but kind of in that territory. But at the same time, definitely profiles as a guy that can handle the bell cow role for an NFL backfield. Singleton is interesting because it's like there's enough there that the Devi, like people like the explosion, but then at the same time, it's very much. I told you before the show, it was very much reminding me of Luther Burden, where you're going to have
Yeah.
people that Luther Burden was super hyped up and he had a great 2023 season. And then 2024 was a mess because they got a new offensive coordinator. They didn't know how to utilize him. And so 2024 tape was a little bit messy on Luther Burden. So you had people that were in two very distinct camps that only watched the 2024 season and said, I just don't even know what people are talking about here with this guy. And then people that were more familiar with it or had watched the other year and saw, yeah, this is what's going on here. So yeah, Singleton had a horrible year this year.
I think
And
Ollie Gordon
so,
is another good example of a guy who,
yeah.
like, had a really, really good early season in college and then kind of fell off towards the end of his college career. But a lot of people were still holding on to hope for Ollie Gordon. Jeff, I don't want to be like too presumptive here, but can you make some comps to this backfield with Allen and Singleton? Does it remind you a little bit of Ohio State's backfield with Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson? Do you think that's an apt comparison, or am I stretching a little bit too thin here?
I think the Ohio State guys are better. I think that,
Sure. Sure. I'm not. Yeah. I mean, they both warranted early second round draft capital. I think that they were better, but just kind of the thunder and lightning of it, where I think Singleton is
sure.
kind of that Travion Henderson. He's got the profile that fantasy players and dynasty managers are going to fall in love with. Like I'm guessing this guy's probably going to come out and run a 4.3 something at the 40, and he's got the pass catching profile and he's got the explosives and all that sort of stuff. So I think people are really going to like Singleton for that reason. But I think NFL teams and NFL coaches are really going to like Allen for doing the dirty work and moving piles and the patience and the footwork and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, Twitchy plays or Twitchy gets drafted. So there is that. Speed gets drafted. And so to me, Singleton reminds me of Travis Etienne a little bit, where it's like there's high end athlete there, but it's also just the polish that polish never really happened. And so I do think that there was, I mean, we know how things went with Penn State this year, and there was probably a lot of, they lost in the semifinals last year. Players had to make an immediate decision. Then you see, why am I blanking on the quarterback's name?
Drew Allar?
Yes, Drew Aller comes back to school. And then, so like I don't know how it happened, but I mean, Drew Aller comes back to school. Obviously he fell apart, but he comes back to school and maybe Singleton's feeling like, hey, all my guys are coming back and we've been together for 3 years. We fell just short of our goal. Maybe let's do this. But then like, I think you were there with Ollie Gordon is a good call out, where sometimes guys do that and then they realize, maybe I didn't really want to do that, or my heart's not there 9 months later and 10 months later. And then you get an embarrassing loss, or really kind of their season fell apart as soon as it was a really close game against Oregon that they lost in overtime. And when that happened, it just, everything fell apart. We know James Franklin was gone. Drew Aller ended up injured after some embarrassing losses. And I know that there was a change of the quarterback or that running back coach too, and some of the Penn State sources cited that as part of the reason why Singleton just didn't put it together this year. So I think that you're exactly right on when it comes to like the profiles and obviously the recruiting profile and the speed that Singleton should be able to showcase. And I mean, he's not you throw out Travion Henderson, but Singleton's like 220. Singleton's a big dude relative to Henderson's a little bit more built. He's not a tiny guy, but he's not.
And I think Singleton almost looks small just because he's coming in after Allen, who is such a big guy that it almost makes him look small. But like Singleton has a 3 down profile, and I think that's kind of what's weird to me is like he has the size and the speed and all the things you want. You'd expect to see this guy in a 3-down role at some point, but it just never happened in college. Do you find that as like a reason to knock a player if throughout their entire college career they could never like fully run away with a backfield? Does that raise like a little bit of maybe like an orange flag for you?
Not if they're with another talented player. So
Fair.
not if there's another guy like Kaytron Allen there, because I was really high on James Cook coming out of Georgia, and the knock on him was like, well, he never ran away from the backfield, and it was because he was with
Mhm.
other NFL running backs, and part of it is by design too. Of if you're a very good college team, then you want multiple running backs, and if you're and
Right.
the reality of it is, if you're a running back with NFL aspirations, you should want to be on a very good team that doesn't make you the bell cow, that doesn't pour it all on you. So like in that regard, no, because I think that conceptually, when you're building an NFL or a college team, that you want that pipeline of running backs, you want to have multiple NFL running backs. Multiple NFL running backs should want to be in a situation with other NFL running backs so that you don't get beaten down during college and you are allowed to trade off and to really take advantage. And so I think that there's a lot that comes into that in terms of that's never really been a concern for me, and almost the opposite of when it is cited as concern, I just see opportunity. And so I think that
Yeah,
if
and we
that's
could
going to
just
be
look back
cited
at
anywhere,
last
but
year.
both
In
these guys are just so good that and they played immediately as freshmen.
Yeah,
So that's the other thing too. They both played immediately as freshmen, both stepped in immediately and were impact players immediately, traded off. And so you've had this change of pace. And again, I've talked way too much about it, but that should be the design of what an NFL caliber recruit should be looking at to be in that type of situation.
agree. And I know you don't like the comp too much, but I still think there's a lot of Ohio State. Like when you're talking about this backfield, I hear so many of the rehashed talking points we had last year about Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. And, yeah, you want to see a guy who ran away with the backfield. Taj Brooks last year was second in the league in carries on a Texas Tech team that had nothing else going for him. RJ Harvey was getting 300 plus touches at a USC team that had nothing else happening there. So, yeah, that's why we see some of these good Big Ten schools have these split backfields. Now, Jeff, we're only talking about one tight end today. And as we said at the top of the show, we want to wait for guys to declare. So I thought we'd be talking about Kenyon Sadiq or Oscar Delp or some of these high profile names. But you threw a name out there, Michael Trigg, that I had not heard before. And the first thing I do is start looking at some of the production. I go, this guy wasn't especially productive, especially through his first 4 years in college. And then as soon as I put on the tape, I'm like, okay, I see why Jeff wanted to talk about this guy. I mean, he is this new era of NFL tight end. I think, he's a little bit undersized. He's not your 6'6", 265 guy that we're used to seeing as a prototypical tight end, but he kind of fits in with the Isaiah Likely's and the Harold Fannons and these guys that we have seen come in and be very productive at the NFL level. Jeff, can you shine a little bit of light as to why it took him his third team in his fifth year to finally break out?
No, I mean, this has been a guy that has been, he's been a Devi darling. He's been a guy that everybody's kind of been waiting for that breakout to come. And so, they, I don't know, man. There's just some of these guys. I mean, I would say the 6 inches between the ears is the reason why it took
Yeah.
so long for it to come together. And
And hey,
we
better
we
late than
both
never,
had.
right? Like if this guy could have gone through 5 years in college and never broken out, at least he finally did. But yeah, when I see the constant transferring and handful of down seasons, it does make me wonder a little bit like what was happening at USC and Ole Miss that you couldn't find your footing.
Yeah, and I mean, coaches change. That can be part of it. And
Yeah.
sometimes coaches change, and I mean, going from USC to Ole Miss, like Lane Kiffin had ties to USC, then ended up at Ole Miss. Maybe there's some of that when he
Mhm.
was being first recruited relative to when he moved to Ole Miss, but then just didn't take off at Ole Miss. And I mean, we both had fun in college. I mean, maybe it's that. I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't want to put too much out there. I'm just saying, I don't know what it was of why Michael Trigg did not take off in the way that
So
many in the Devi space and kind of foul recruiting expected, because he was a guy that was expected to be a big time producer at the college level. But then, you touched on it. And so I do think that if you're going to be involved in like rookie, whatever. You don't even have to make content. If you just want to follow rookies, whatever it might be, you really have to watch guys. You have to watch a lot of guys because
Mm-hmm.
you have to find these guys. Like Michael Wilson was a guy that I found that watching tape because I was like, this guy is an NFL wide receiver and he had injuries. So he really wasn't on like the college fantasy level, wasn't a Devy type of a guy, but you watch him. Or a guy like Isaac Tisla last year of being in an Arkansas offense that really wasn't flowing through Isaac Tisla. He transferred from a small school, but he twitched up as all heck. And I mean, that's going to get guys drafted. And so you hit it exactly in terms of what NFL offenses are looking for out of the tight end position. It's really the two tight end positions, but it's that second tight end that can be that move guy, can be that slot receiver, can be that really that chess piece that all these offenses are looking for. And so when you have a player like that's what Trigg offers, he can potentially be that chess piece type of a tight end. And that's really what plays well in fantasy. And so I think that we've seen over the last couple of years, NFL offenses have done a much better job of unlocking that profile and making it productive. Because if you've played Dynasty for a long time, if you played fantasy for a long time, we all have had the next potential Darren Waller at the end of our bench, and so NFL teams finally try to figure out how to make some of those guys. But again, watching the Dolphins this week against the Steelers, I mean, like a Darren Waller type is where like kind of Trigg is where if you're going to project it.
Yeah, and I asked you the question kind of rhetorically. I did dig into it a little bit, and it's all like murmurs. Like no coach has ever come out and said like,
Right.
I don't like the way that he blocks or I don't like the way that he runs his routes. But what you hear from a lot of fans of the teams watching is that he just kind of lacks effort, and we see this in the NFL too. Like this was the second time we brought up George Pickens on this show, but I remember that was like the biggest knock with George Pickens is that like if he's not the primary read, he's just going to kind of take the route off and you see that from some players, and I guess that was kind of it with Trigg. But again, you joke like we were in college, we had fun in college. I don't want to knock a player for what he did at 18, 19 years old. Like what I see here is that now as a 22-year-old, he put it together and he had a reasonably productive season. And there are times where I watch him and I just say like, yeah, that skill set, being a big, fast guy who can catch the ball in stride and turn up field and run through a defender's face, that's going to translate to the NFL. And sometimes I think it's as simple as that. So this is a player that wasn't on my radar whatsoever, but another player, like I said about these Penn State running backs, that was just a joy to watch today, has a very fun skill set that I could see translating.
Yeah, and so like Xavier Legette is an interesting one to talk about. They're just kind of like similar type thing where like you see this insanely twitched up athlete and like why did it never come together? And I laugh a little bit because like Legette was very outspoken about why it didn't come together. He was a knucklehead basically, and the
Right.
coaches said, "Hey, you've been a screw off for 4 years. This is it. This is the time that if you want to become an NFL player, this is now or never." And Legette locked in, and he is still kind of a knucklehead, and he was a first round pick, obviously, but he's not been a productive overall receiver, and he's been a disappointment as a first round pick. But at the same time, he's still playing almost every single snap for the Panthers. And there's still things that in that profile that teams talking themselves into because of I always go back to the planet theory. There's only so many guys on
Mhm.
the planet that are that size and can move that way. I think it was Bill Polian always used to say that the planet theory, but Trigg is the planet theory guy of like, there's only so many guys that have that athleticism in that size package, and teams, NFL teams, college teams are going to continue to give those guys a chance because when it works really, really well. But the reality of it is some like players like that, maybe high school is too easy, basically. And then you get to college and you have to learn how to do things, and learning things is hard. And sometimes when you're 19 years old, 18 years old, the hard is you're not ready for the hard. And then sometimes I know for me, I'm very much like the person I saw a lot more in probably in high school than college, but like between my senior and like to end of junior year or between my sophomore to end of junior year to senior year in high school, I was a completely different person. And so I think that there's a reason why you're at that level for 4 years, because you learn, you grow, you develop, and you become what you're going to become. But I do think that there's something very real in a fourth or fifth year player that always viewed themselves as an NFL player, and the things weren't coming together, and the coaches sit them down in January or in August and say, hey, it is now or never time for you. And when you're 23, 22 years old relative to when you're 19, that's going to hit a lot harder.
And that development never stops. We can talk about the growth made from our junior years to our senior years of high school, and the growth that we made throughout college and after college. But guess what? There are players right now. Philip Rivers, 44 years old. The way he was talking on that press box was completely different than he talked 5 years ago. He's a grandfather now. Like, different life experiences are constantly changing the people that we are. So I don't want to go full, off the rails on the couch here. But yeah, I mean, this is something that we talk about all the time. Like, these reasons that we use to knock these young players, they could completely, whatever negative traits those are in their personality or their work ethic or whatever, they can work to get those out of their system and become a better player. So we see this all the time, and we see these guys take these huge developmental steps forward. I think, like, one that jumps out for me is AJ Brown. Like, he is still very outspoken with the media. He doesn't hold back, but where a lot of what he did early in his career negatively impacted the team and was a lot of passive aggressiveness or subtweets on Twitter. Now he is kind of emerged as a leader of that team, and he's going to call it like he sees it, but in a much more tactful and respectful way than he did 5-6 years ago. So yeah, the player that he was when he was at college, and the player that he was when he was at Tennessee, and the player that he is today, and the player that he is 5 years from now are four very different people. And we just need to account for that sort of development. Well, Jeff, I don't know if you have any final thoughts here, but before we sign off, I do want to ask the YouTube audience, if there's anything you heard that we were out of line saying about some of these players. We know college fans are very passionate about the teams that they root for and cover. So let us know if, like, you can add any insight to any of these players that we discussed today. We are going to lock in more and more every single episode between now and the NFL draft, as we just start to put these pieces together and dig more into these rookies, find out more, find new players to talk about. Jeff, this is a fun, exciting time of the year, and I'm happy to start dipping my toes in those waters.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a lot more prospects. And so your favorite prospect, we didn't talk about them. We don't hate them. We just didn't talk about them yet because we only have so much time. And that is one thing that I can't believe you didn't talk about this guy. And it's I mean, sorry, buddy.
We'll have 170 players about. I think that's usually typically where we land, is between like 150 and 180 players in version 1 of our rookie guide. We'll have that done in about 4 to 6 weeks. So we're going to keep talking about more players. We're going to keep talking about more things that we unearth through this discovery phase. But be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast feed, whatever you got to do to check out these episodes, as we're going to be bringing you more and more rookie content between now and the NFL draft. We'll be back Friday. We're still doing our NFL matchup preview episode on Friday morning. So that'll be on podcast feed. You can also find the live stream on YouTube, Twitter, or anywhere else that you like to enjoy your live stream. So back Friday morning with that. We'll be back next week with more rookie content. Want to thank y'all so much for taking the time to tune in today, and we will see you on Friday.